Hi, this is Richard Barrett for Guitarist magazine. Welcome to our review of the Vox AC15X, that's the hand-wired version. Regular viewers of the channel will know that we've used a Vox AC15 C1 forever. That's still a current model, but obviously this brings something new to the table. So the question being, does this sound better than the other one? Well, we think it does a bit actually, but perhaps not for the reasons you might expect. You'll have just heard a few different tones. I used some single coils and humbuckers just to give you a rough overview of the extremes, if you like, of clean, crunch and dirty that you can get from these amps. Vox, like Fender and like Marshall, are one of the primary colours, if you like, of guitar tones. I mean, with the Fender being super clean, like a Fender Twin does the clean sparkle like almost nothing else. Marshall does the super saturated. Vox sits in a very sweet spot in the middle of those. So let's have a look at this amp in a bit more detail. Well, in the broader context, this is part of a range, a hand-wired range. The smallest is the AC4, then it goes up to the 10-watt version. They're single channel amps. Next we have this AC15, which has normal and top boost channels, and the larger AC30 has a very similar layout. Now we think that the AC15 sits in a particularly sweet spot. We all know how great the AC30 is, but they're a very loud, very big, very heavy amplifier. And in 2025, maybe this AC15 could cover you for an awful lot of gigs, certainly recordings. Vox wanted to get back to the classic sort of 60s spec, and this amp represents a kind of update of some key elements. You could liken it to having a classic car but with modern running gear and brakes. We have a redesigned power supply, we have a redesigned transformer. They've even approached the pine cabinet as well with fresh ears. So we end up with an optimized version of the AC15, which covers the bases that the AC15 always has, but with more features, such as an effects loop. So as I hinted at earlier, this is the hand-wired version, and we've got two ECC83s or 12AX7s in the preamp. Now this is something that Vox changed to in the early 60s because they had been using an SF6 up to the late 50s, but that valve had given some reliability issues. So this is true to the spec of the 60s Voxes. Power amp is, as you may expect, two EL84s, so that's half of what you get in the AC30. For the speaker we have a single 12-inch Alnico Blue. The C1 version as standard comes with a Celestian greenback, but I believe you can order it specially with an Alnico Blue at extra cost. Anyway, that's enough about the specs for now. Let's have a listen to some sounds. I'm going to use this Nags chop tank to demo the sounds. It's very much like a Strat pickup layout, so you'll be familiar with the kind of sounds that I'll be getting here. Now, looking at the control panel, you can see we've got the normal channel, we've got the top boost channel, which has a few more features like the bass and treble, and then we have the reverb with its tone and level controls. And of course, then we have the power section, which has the tone cut, which is a little bit like a presence control, though I'll talk more about that when we get there. And then there is the master volume. So each channel has a low and a high input, and obviously there's lower gain, higher gain, so you can optimize that to suit whatever type of pickup you're using, though I do find that the low input has slightly less top end as well. So let's just have a listen to this using the bridge pickup. You can hear that it's quite full and rich sounding. It's got that mid-range to it. I've got the tone cut set straight up, and I haven't got the boost or the bright on at the moment. I think I'll get into those when I've shown you the range of the volume and the high gain input. We're crystal clear down there, though still with some of that warmth that you associate with a Vox. I'm going to crank it a little bit. You can hear that that's breaking up now, but in a very musical way that allows me to play more complex voicings without the whole thing fuzzing out. So I'm going to back that off a little bit. It's about halfway. Go for high input. Let's see what we get. I think that you could probably duplicate sounds to a certain extent using different levels of volume with the high or the low input, though the low input tends not to be so bright. I'm hearing a little bit more breakup than I probably want there for this particular sound, so let's take it down. So while we're sat there, let's hear what the boost brings in. You can hear that coming. So I think balancing the master volume level with this channel volume level, you can get more gain by turning it up, obviously, or you can turn it down and use the boost. You can get different permutations, really. There's a lot to be got out of this with small adjustments. Now, something that we haven't heard yet is the bright. So let's have that on. Now I'm really getting the brightness there. I'm getting Beatles Nowhere Man type of brightness, I think. So let's have a look at what this tone cut control does, because it works the opposite way to what people who are unfamiliar with these amps might expect. When I zero it, it's basically not cutting any high end, so be prepared, this will be bright. Now let's max it out. So that is operating at a much higher frequency than the bright or the treble control. So we'll get more into that when we get to the other channel. For now, I'm going to turn that back to halfway up. We'll call that flat. So with the bright and the boost and the volume up and in the high input, we can really get quite a lot of gain out of this normal channel. Now we do have two channels. There is a foot switch, but that's not a channel switch. That is to switch the reverb on and off. If you wanted to be able to switch between the channels on the fly, then you could get something like a Boss line selector and set it to go A or B. Though I think that to regard this as a two-channel amp like a Boogie or the split-channel Marshalls is probably to misunderstand really what they mean to give you by giving us two channels. I think that it's two versions of a sound, but it's not a clean channel and a dirty channel per se, I don't think. Right, from there I'd like to swap over to the top boost channel, going into the low input, and I'm going to change these settings so that they're straight up, so we've got a nice neutral start. Now let's see what we've got. To my ear, we have slightly less low end in this channel, though we do have the bass and the treble EQ, so you can compensate for that. I just think that by default, maybe part of the top boost circuitry limits the bottom end, who knows. Straight up on the volume, treble and bass here in the low input. Now there are various shades that we can get here, but something that I'd like to get straight into, because I mentioned it not so long ago, is that we have the tone cut and we have the treble control. Now each of these operates at a different frequency, so I'd like to illustrate how you can tune the top end. One thing that I will do is to just give us a little bit too much treble to start with, and let's hear that. I guess too much treble is subjective. I'm just warning you that it's going to be bright. Let's do a little bit more of that. So that's really wiry. Let's leave that up there, but then bring the tone cut up as well. What I think we're getting there is we're getting the ultra highs that are coming from the treble, and then we're smoothing things off a little bit higher than that with the tone cut. I'm going to reverse that. I'm going to turn the treble down low and put the tone cut down very low. Let's take the tone cut off completely. That's nice and lively, and it seems like we've got some cut at the very top end, but when we go slightly lower down the frequency spectrum, maybe around about 3K, where so there can be some quite nasty stuff there if you're not careful, then that's quite a more balanced top end. I'd like to go into the high gain input and just see what that sound is like. Now where I'm sat, that is pretty bright, so I'm going to try bringing that tone cut up halfway. Think of it like a presence, really. Let's hear that now. And just to really hammer the point home, I'm going to bring the treble up and the tone cut up again with that slightly gainier sound. Straight up is very good. That's a nice convenient thing to have with an amplifier, where basically you set the controls straight up and it sounds pretty good, and then you can trim it from there. One of the things that I haven't talked about yet, I was mentioning about the channels and that this doesn't really have a clean channel or a dirty channel per se, or at least I suggest not looking at it that way. The Vox amps are great at being controlled from the guitar, so you can get lovely chimey clean sounds or in-between sounds with the twist of the button, like almost no other amp. So I'm going to gain this up a little bit, do a couple of more power chordy things, and then I'm going to bring the volume down and we're going to hear a little bit of that sort of rolled back tone. Well, this vibrato arm's a bit stiff, but that has reminded me of a very famous user of these amps, and I'd like to go to the reverb really. Crank the level on that. I'll show you the tone in a minute. That's set sort of quite high just now, but... So bear in mind that with the guitar up on 10, that's on about 5 or 6. So that's a spring reverb. That's the genuine article. It's not a digital simulation. Let's absolutely max that out. Now, while that's maxed out, that might be a good opportunity to see what this tone control does. So let's max that out, subtle as ever. About halfway. Subtle difference, but it is there. Then let's zero it. people mess around with the EQ of the reverb in the recording studio all the time, and it's a real luxury to be able to do it on an amplifier. At the moment, the reverb is maxed, but the tone is on 0. So that's just pulled it back and mellowed it out. Bring it up. And it has much more of that metallic clang to it. So let's go back to a kind of happy medium there. As I mentioned earlier, there is a foot switch for turning this on and off, a little bit of a throwback to the days when reverb was regarded as much more of an effect, but it is nice to be able to just go dry at the click of a button. Maybe that will be one way of using this. And of course, while we're talking about ambient effects, modern convenience on this amp is a bypassable, if that is a word, effects loop. An effects loop, of course, is traditionally an insert between the preamp and the power amp. Now, on an amp like the Vox, you've got the preamp. There's quite a lot of gain available in the preamp, though a lot of the character that you get when you're running this at a higher level is coming from that power section with the EL84s just starting to break up. If you're not using anything in the effects loop, you're free to absolutely max the whole thing and get every bit of saturation out of it. Though I think that the sweet spot is probably where the power amp's just beginning to smooth out and compress a little bit, and you find the modulation and the time-based effects like delays can sound great. So I'm going to set up a nice crunch sound here, and I thought it might be really interesting to compare what we get from this to what we can get out of the C1 version, which is our studio amp. Now, we're not going to go for duplicating knob positions or anything like that. We're going to go by ear and see if we can get the same or similar sound. And we're not going to make any judgments about which one's better, actually, but it might be interesting if you want to drop in the comments which you prefer. That'd be interesting to see. So let's have a listen to this. Well, if you've ever put on somebody else's glasses and noticed how you can't see anything properly, that's a little bit how I feel now, having had a play with this. Now, we've tried to get as close as possible, without being too scientific about it, to the sound we were getting out of the other amp. I don't know how close we really got. I would say that there's a couple of reasons for that, and a big one would be that this has got the Celestian greenback in there, which will have a different voicing to the Alnico blue. I think that this was revalved a couple of years ago. That they're not the stock valves, though they are the same model. They are EL84s in the power amp and the ECC83s, 12AX7s, whichever you want to call them, in the preamp. I've ended up cutting a lot more high end off here. It feels like it's harder, maybe a little bit more focused in the low end, particularly in that top boost channel. I've run the gain a bit higher. Interestingly, I think that I haven't really missed the reverb tone control too much, though I do like that feature. Well, my feeling is that what we've got here are ostensibly two similar, but in practice quite different amps. I think that you could be here for quite a long time trying to perfectly match the sound, but I'm just not sure with the different speaker, whether we'd actually get there. I think we've tried to get as close as we can, but I'd be interested to see in the comments what other people think. Okay, so we've swapped back over. We're back to the hand-wired one. And many of you will be making up your own minds about the sound that you prefer. I mean, we personally love this one. It's a great sounding amp. There's a depth to it and a richness to it. I think it's probably an oversimplification, if not completely incorrect, to say that's down to it being hand-wired. Arguably, the fact that it is hand-wired is not really the issue. I think that what you tend to get alongside something that's been hand-wired is something where people have taken a lot of care. There's been a process layer upon layer of fine adjustments and refinements. I mean, Vox took particularly great sounding examples of their 60s amps and they analysed them and they duplicated those characteristics while looking to iron out some of the technical glitches that can happen with the vintage amps and the vintage designs. So is this version worth more than double the C1 version? Well, we do feel that with all the upgrades and the top quality components that it is a significant upgrade. And it is one of the best, if not the best, AC15 we've ever come across. So yeah, that is a big yes from us. So that's our review of the AC15X hand-wired. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want to make a comment, please do so below. And don't forget to subscribe and do hit like as well, because that helps the channel. Thanks a lot and see you again another time.